Hey guys, it's Callus. Welcome back to the Emerald Open 3 series that I've been doing. We are now in the top 8, the quarterfinals, making a nice run in this tour. And our opponent, hey, does this guy look familiar? It's Lambo. If he does look familiar, that's because he was in our draft pool. So he too, out of our draft pool, has gone all the way here to the top 8. Pretty good. Like I said, I think I had a strong draft pool. So we talked about it during the draft phase, where I didn't love his Wheel of Zapdos Gengar. I mean, it's obviously good, but I would have taken one of those plus Celebi since that was the option at the time. But here's what he's got. So he's got a little Superman-esque team going on. He's got these 3 Levitate Flyer Mons. He's got a Spiker with the ability to protect the spikes. He's got Registeel, which I think is criminally underrated in this, as we've discussed. Slowbro is a mixed threat. It can, like I said, it learns EQ, it learns Calm Mind, it learns Psychic, Surf, Ice Beam, Fire Blast, T-Bolt, all sorts of stuff. It learns T-Wave. And then crucially, you thought Swallow was bad. Tauros is very threatening for us. Swallow simply doesn't hit that hard, and it has the problems with flying. It has the flying weaknesses. We can just get it with Ice Beam. We can just get it with T-Bolt. We can just get it with a Rock Attack. Tauros doesn't have that. It's only weak to fighting. And of course, we do have Medicham, but Medicham doesn't exactly switch into Tauros very well. So Tauros is definitely something that our opponent's going to be bringing in this match, and we very much have to factor that into our build, because we frankly don't have a good switch for it at all. If our opponent is smart, I think the Tauros should be adamant coming from him. He can go Jolly, but he must realize that if we really truly want to outspeed it with our Raikou, we can. Whether or not he goes Jolly or adamant, we can just outspeed it if we want to outspeed it. And most of our team, other than Raikou, is slow, and Tauros, if it is adamant, will still outspeed us anyway. So in my opinion, he should clearly go adamant with the Tauros, and he should bring it 100% of the time. So that's a big threat. Glalie is a spiker. I mean, we don't care so much about it like exploding or ice beaming or whatever. Normally, we don't care so much about spikers, but the Gengar, he does have the ability to block us rapid spinning, and unlike Dusclops, where we could just click our stab EQ with Donphan, obviously Gengar is immune. Now, we do have the option of going for HP Ghost, which hits the Gengar pretty good, but anytime we try to remove the spikes, we have that 50-50, and if we're wrong, the Gengar is a threat. I think the most threatening set that the Gengar could have, and this is kind of annoying for us, is a bulky WoW Taunt set. I think if he, let's say that we switch Regice into Gengar, which is probably a fairly standard and common interaction in this match, we come in on one layer of spikes, and then he burns us. I think if we try to T-Wave it, or try to rest, and then he taunts, it can actually get pretty awkward. And he might not even have to go Bolt Beam in this case. Like, let's say one of those moves instead, since he has Regice in mind, let's say he replaces one of Thunderbolt or Ice Punch. Let's say he gets Fire Punch instead. So if he's WoW Taunt Fire Punch, for example, that could actually get kind of ugly for our Regice. So this is a scary matchup for sure. I don't think it's unwinnable by any means, but the Tauros is definitely tough. Slowbro is a diverse threat. Registeel has that gimmick set that we talked about in the previous, where it has the ability to just have Curse, Amnesia, Rest in one attack, and you have to factor that into your build, or you can just lose to it. And then obviously Gengar is just a threatening poke in general. If he just goes like WoW 3 attack Gar or just 4 attack Gar, I'm not as worried about that because the Regice and the Raikou can wall it. And likewise, I'm not as worried about the Zapdos because the Regice and the Raikou can wall it. But certain sets of Gengar can be a threat. Playing the Spikes 50-50 game every time we may or may not spin can be a threat if we're wrong. It's very execution heavy. And then Slowbro is just kind of a scary poke to play against in general because its sets are so diverse. You can kind of custom tailor it to threaten anything. It could just be like T-Wave, 3 attacks, and the 3 attacks can be whatever you need it to be. It learns Focus Punch as well. I didn't say that earlier, but it is a really diverse move pool. It could go Earthquake if it wants to hit Raikou. Slowbro is good in this, and it's underrated, but Tauros clearly is the biggest threat, and the biggest thing that we need to deter. So you should see how we tackled this matchup. The two biggest threats, and our lead philosophy has been the same throughout. You lead to deter whatever the most threatening thing is. Whatever the worst case scenario is from your opponent, you lead to beat that. So clearly, we knew it was either going to be the Glalie or the Tauros. He's either going to try to establish spikes or he's going to lead with the Tauros immediately. It could be the Zapdos as like a precautionary middle ground, but I don't care about that because we'll just go to Regice and we're fine. So I'm really concerned about the Glalie and the Tauros. So clearly the Medicham wanted to lead, but the problem with that is that it doesn't one-hit KO Tauros unless we have like Focus Punch or Brick Break or whatever with very close to max attack. But if we do that, we don't get to go first. Tauros is faster than us, so even if we can one-hit KO it with Brick Break, which like I said, we don't because Intimidate, but even if we did one-hit KO it, it outspeeds us and almost always one-hit KOs us. Return, we can live with some amount of bulk, but like when we start talking about Double Edge, or I guess Hyper Beam, but he's not going to use that. But Double Edge is a move that we have a very hard time winning, surviving. We can't without a ridiculous amount of bulk. So this is what we came up with. We got kind of funky here. We busted out the Impish Medicham, believe it or not. And this is a very specific set, designed specifically for the Tauros. So we are Impish Max Defense Medicham and HP because Max Defense isn't even enough to always live. With these EVs, Medicham will always survive Double Edge from Tauros, pending a crit, of course, which is a disaster scenario. And then Counter, obviously, will kill him back. But we've got enough attack still to be a threat offensively. Shadow Ball, for example, would really hurt Gengar. Brick Break would kill Glalie, all that good stuff. So this is the only set that makes sense because there's no other lead that we have on our team that can handle both Glalie and Tauros from the lead position. We can go over that real quick, shall we? So if we were to lead Raikou, that can be one-hit KO'd by Tauros. We could also make it really, really bulky so it's not one-hit KO'd by Tauros, but then Glalie can just spike up on us and there's not much we can do back. Dragonite can also handle Tauros, but is easily one-hit KO'd by Glalie with the Stab Ice Beam, so that's not reliable. Milotic can maybe handle Tauros, but it doesn't do anything meaningful back. We can't even come close to one-hit KOing it with Surf or even with Hydro Pump, and we don't have something like T-Wave that we could do back. We could go for Hypnosis, but like, what happens if you miss? That seems terrible. And then against Glalie, we do little to nothing. It would just sit there and spike up on Milotic. Donphan, we did opt for counter here. So again, this and heavy defense, Impish, heavy defense counter. So again, Tauros very much in mind. But it's the same problem. Like, what if it's just Glalie? What if he just spikes on you? What if he just ice beams you? You don't beat that matchup. And then we have Regice, which is the exact same issue. It can handle Tauros. You take a hit, you Thunder Wave it back, and the Tauros is essentially crippled. That's good. But what are you doing against Glalie? We considered HP Fire on Regice, but it just doesn't do that much to Glalie, and we need both Ice Beam and T-Bolt for different reasons. So we just couldn't find a spot for HP Fire, and it didn't seem that great. So it's the same issue. You stop the Tauros, but you don't stop the Glalie. So the only lead that we could come up with that we thought would handle both of them is the Medicham, and it has to be this very specific Medicham. So it's got counter, it's got EVs to always survive Tauros Double Edge. We did mention Hyper Beam before. We don't expect him to use that, but if he does have Hyper Beam, it would be a roll. But let's say the worst case happens and he Hyper Beams us and he just kills Medicham flat out on turn 1. We obviously need a plan to follow that up. So the plan in this case would be the Dragonite, and then we would immediately click T-Wave on the recharge turn. Tauros would have no choice but to take that, which would essentially cripple him, because if we look at the opponent's squad, this is I'm going to call it a no-heal bell squad. Yes, Parasect learns aromatherapy, so technically he has it, but he's never ever going to bring that, so for all intents and purposes, it's a no-heal bell squad. And then Yeah, so after we T-Wave the Tauros, we would then sub up. Eventually, he would either full power or switch, and then we'd start flinging Dragon Claws and Focus Punches around, and we would do a lot of damage. He doesn't have a great switch into this set of Dragonite. Other than that, like I said, Metacham is designed with the Tauros in mind. The Raikou, we went with an offensive set here, max attack. We opted for Timid here, and the Raikou, if it gets rolling, is something that he doesn't have a fantastic switch into. The closest thing is probably the Registeel, which can handle it, and it can have threatening moves like Earthquake, T-Wave, what have you. Can also learn Amnesia if it wants to go that way. But he doesn't have a great switch in general to the Raikou other than the Registeel. But there are things that threaten the Raikou offensively, like Boomgar, like Tauros, obviously Flygon. The Dragonite we already discussed, but we thought this was the only set that truly covers all the things. If you go strictly special, you probably have a problem with the Registeel. You could opt for Flamethrower, but then you can run into different problems. The Slowbro could wall you, for example. We couldn't find a combination of coverage moves that covers everything, and it absolutely had to have something to threaten Glalie and Tauros, so this is what we ended up on as the neutral. Milotic absolutely wants Ice Beam in this match for obvious reasons. Ice Week, Ice Week. And you obviously can randomly freeze stuff, which is cool, but Ice Beam, very clear here. Refresh, mandatory. Could easily have Toxic or T-Wave on any of Zapdos, Flygon, Registeel. Gengar can have WoW. Slowbro learns T-Wave. You want Refresh in this matchup. Donphan, like I said, we opted for a very defensive set. We wanted an extra cushion against Tauros. So we have to play the Earthquake Hidden Power Ghost game against Gengar, which is crappy, because if we want to try to spin, we have to guess every time whether we're spinning or whether we're HP ghosting, because he can actually protect his spikes. Pretty obnoxious, but it's what we got to do in the matchup. And then counter is just for Tauros, pretty much. If it randomly hits Flygon, fine, but like a more realistic scenario is if we try to counter, the Flygon just clicks sub or clicks toxic, and it's really bad. So I don't even think it's worth trying a lot of the time against Flygon. I think it's basically just for Tauros. And then the Regice, we went for Bold again, which is not only to reduce the damage if it gets boomed on by Glalie and by Gengar, which very well may matter, but of course to tank Tauros hits better and to have a little counterplay with the T-Wave. So here is our top 8 matchup. Jabba against Lambo playing as Corky Busek. And we'll switch the sides for continuity. So he's going to lead Gengar here, which is an interesting choice. It wasn't any of the three that we thought it would be. So Glalie and Tauros we thought were the most likely, and we thought that Zapdos was kind of like the middle ground. Not sure about Gengar. He did lead Gengar last round, so maybe that should have been a sign. I don't know. But this is an interesting choice. He could stay in and do something like Will-O-Wisp or Explosion, but obviously he's potentially at risk unless he's just booming of a Shadow Ball here. But we're also very much at risk of just getting burnt. So, like, Metacham really can't stay in here, so I think we have to switch. So we do opt for the Regice, and he does just turn 1 boom. And it does 56%. Not a bad chunk. The fact that we're bold is definitely relevant here. Had we been modest and not had all those defense EVs, that would have done a lot more or maybe even killed us. So definitely glad in this moment that we're bold, and I think that's a good turn 1 for us. It leaves the Regice, and he hasn't even gained lefties yet, so he's going to go back up to 50. It leaves him healthy enough to where it's very realistic that later on in the battle he could get a rest off if he needs to. So the Gar is gone, not for nothing. The damage matters more than not at all, but like I'll take this trade all day, every day. I think it's a good turn 1 for Jabba. Pretty happy with how that played out. So he's going to follow up, of course, with the Tauros, which Regice is definitely not going to stay in, so this is the right follow-up for him. He knows that no matter what, when he clicks his normal move here, whether it's Return or Double Edge, that it's going to do damage to something. We either have to sacrifice the Regice, which is not ideal, or we have to bring something else in to take a beating. So this is definitely a good follow-up for him, and we don't have a fantastic play. We could stay in and try to T-Wave. That would be gambling on what his normal move is. If he has return, we can probably survive that, and the T-Wave is really good. But if it is just double edge, we probably just die, and that's obviously not so good. So it's a decision to make right out the gate. Jabba does not stay in, and he goes to my Lotic, and the move is return rather than double edge, which is a weird damage roll. So 55 leaving us at 51. We probably die to the next one, but like, what do you switch here? Do you switch something else into return without a normal resist? I think he's probably just going to have to let the Milotic go, which is not ideal, but this is kind of the only way that it's ever going to go with the Tauros. We kind of have to go blow for blow with it and trade with it. And then once he kills something, we'll have to go to like Dragonite, click T-Wave, whatever. And we're going to just have to play the blow for blow game. I think that's really the only way that we can handle this guy unless our opponent screws up. So we stay in, which I think we have to. And unsurprisingly, return kills us. Here's the Dragonite follow-up. And I don't love our opponent staying in here. I guess he's operating that we can't one-hit KO him back, which unless for like CB Brick Break or something, he's right. But I still don't know that I love this trade for him. I'm pretty happy on our end that we T-Wave the Tauros because I think that the Tauros is the single most threatening Mon on the opposing team. Like I said, Gengar can be, depending on the set, but it's dead. Maybe the Registeel, maybe the Slowbro, but it very much felt to us the whole time like the Tauros was the biggest threat. So even though that return did a ton, I think this is a good trade for us. I'm happy T-Waving it here, and I certainly think we're in an okay position. Pretty close game, but neutralizing the Tauros is a great start. So Jabba's, of course, going to sub up and fish for switches or full pairs. Doesn't get it the first time around. We're at 26%, so we can sub again and go to 1% if he wants. He opts for Dragon Claw. I'm not clear why we didn't sub again. Sometimes Showdown and replays have this like display glitch where it says you're at 26%, but you're not actually, which is really awkward. It's the same way like in OU. Blissey will use Seismic Toss, and it'll say 26%, just hypothetically. But then the next turn against the exact same Mon, it'll Seismic Toss again, and it'll say 27%, even though obviously the damage amount is exactly the same. So I'm not clear why it does that. It's just kind of a quirk of Showdown, of the network, the programming that we play on. But that could be what happened here. I think that Jabba definitely made a mistake by not subbing again if he had the option to do so, but I'm not 100% clear that he did have the option to do so. But yeah, missed opportunity to sub there if he had the option, and maybe it would have mattered, maybe it wouldn't. It really, we don't know if the Tauros would have full parried on the following turn or not, but he certainly should have taken the opportunity if it were there. So we follow up with Metacham, which he obviously doesn't have a great switch. I don't like the Brick Break here. Once again, I think we're supposed to substitute here. I think we are supposed to fish for full para and or a switch and try to land in a situation where we're behind a sub. I think that clearly works out better in this case. Brick Break, not very exciting against Slowbro, but if we were behind a sub here, we could Shadow Ball it. He'll do whatever to pop the sub. He can't learn Roar, so it doesn't matter. He uses, Surf, whatever, pops the sub. And then we have the 50-50 of either Shadow Balling again or clicking substitute again. But I think the Brick Break here is not the right play, and I think once again we should have substituted. So here comes Slowbro, and we're going to substitute now. And I don't like the T-Wave from our opponent because I think that the substitute on our end is fairly obvious. I guess it's a 50-50 as far as he's concerned. I guess, why would we substitute when our opponent can just insta-pop it with Surf or with Psychic or whatever? But the risk versus reward I don't love on our opponent's end. This is now free for us because he T-waved into our sub, and he basically just undid Jabba's previous misplay and allowed us to be in this position that I think we should have been in the first place. But Jabba butchered it, and then our opponent kind of butchered it right back. So now the Metacham is pretty threatening behind the sub, and obviously you just click Shadow Ball. So here that comes, 48%, an awkward roll. Specs drop doesn't matter. We probably don't kill with a follow-up Shadow Ball, so it's debatable whether you're supposed to stay in here or not. You can play the 50-50 game with sub and T-Wave again. You could stay in and Shadow Ball and get hit with T-Wave, which is bad. You could also try to sub on a T-Wave, but what could happen there is Slowbro simply attacks, pops the sub, and he just sits there and gains more lefties. So it's a mind game turn for sure, and there's no perfect solution. I think a good play from Jabba's then would be to switch in the Regice here, because it's probably very safe against the Slowbro. It could still have something like Focus Punch, but I don't think that's overly likely. I think the Regice could get in here and not only threaten the Slowbro with Thunderbolt, but also have the ability to get a rest off if it feels like it needs it. So I personally probably wouldn't stay in and risk the Medicham here. And Jabba agrees and goes to the Regice. So he takes 20% from Psychic, no problem, unless he follows up here with Focus Punch, which we would disrupt, or with a Fire Attack, which he doesn't seem to have. We're pretty safe. He's going to go to Glalie, and Regice is going to go back up to 42% after lefties. There's no attack that Glalie could have other than Explosion that could kill us, but we do have to be aware of Explosion. He does learn things like Earthquake or Shadow Ball, for example, or Crunch, which are kind of cool moves. Nice little diverse move pool for Glalie, but none of that stuff is going to kill Regice, nor would HP Fire. It is really Explosion or Bust. Hey, Boom or Bust here. Unfortunately, Regice can't do a ton to the Glalie either. We can fling a T-Wave at it, and we probably should, but we don't really threaten it a ton beyond that. So there's the obvious spikes, and we trade with T-Wave. So layer number 1 comes down. His Gengar is gone, so if we do ever spin, he can't block it. Does get us with a Toxic here. This is a weird turn. We can spin, but we're taking a huge Ice Beam if we do, pending full para, which does not come, and that's just going to kill us. So I don't know that I love that, but Jabba at least gets to follow up with Medicham. He's clearly behind at this moment, though. And again, he's just going to Brick Break rather than click Substitute. He keeps doing that, and I'm not clear why. But he subs now to try to block the T-Wave. Doesn't come. Psychic pops. So 50-50 again here. He's going to Shadow Ball. And it's going to be Psychic. So Jabba's right this time. And the Slowbro now is in danger if it stays in, which it does. So there's the Shadow Ball, and the Bro goes down. And that's going to leave us now in a 3-4 situation. Still don't know the last for Lambo here. He could have the Flygon, but he also could have opted to not bring the Flygon and to go with one of the other options here. And our last is obviously going to be Raikou. So Medicham here is not ever going to survive a T-Bolt. So we're going to go to the Regice here. Takes 19%, leaves us at 35%. So it's a one-turn window here for our opponent to get a crit or a para plus full para. Otherwise, the Regice can get a rest off here, and we should be in reasonable shape. The Tauros is still a hard-hitting threat, but it is paralyzed. The Zapdos is never going to be able to kill the Regice. And then the Glalie is also paralyzed, but its last move is almost certainly Boom, so we do have to be aware of that. And then, of course, we have the Raikou in the back. His last poke is going to be Flygon or Registeel. It would be better for us if it were Flygon, because our Raikou has a very reasonable chance to sweep, given what's left, if it is Flygon. If it's Registeel, it gets a little more interesting, but let's get there first. So he pulls it back to Glalie, and he does not fish for the one-turn Critter Para. We're now going to pull it back to Medicham. I hate this Toxic here. I'm not clear why you wouldn't Ice Beam, Spike, or Boom there. Toxic feels like the worst move out of the three. What were you trying to hit? Regice? He must not have realized that Regice had rest, but that Toxic does not seem good to me. I think, oh man, the Dawn Fan's down. I think you just Spike. I think you just Spike pretty much always there. You could Boom. I can get behind Boom. I think the Toxic is bad. I think that's a clear misplay from our opponent, and he should have gone for either Spikes or Boom. But hey, works for me. Miss a Toxic, let the Medicham in, giving us a window back into this game. See if Jabba can capitalize. Zapdos comes in. We can't really do a lot to that. There's the Brick Break. We do get some lefties back. Here comes Regice, same shit. Our opponent's going to have that one-turn window here. 26%, we're totally safe. He can't kill us with a Thunderbolt. So if he wants, he can go for the one-turn opportunity to crit us or para full para. And he doesn't go for it yet again. So here comes Raikou. We're going to sub up. Our opponent's going to instantly boom. So it leaves us in a 3-3. Unfortunately for us, it is last poke Registeel rather than the Flygon that we hoped, but I don't blame him for not bringing Flygon in this matchup. I think that was probably a good call. I think Flygon is not great against our team, but with this being the sweeper set here of Raikou, rather than the rest set, we may have a hard time given the current game state getting through the Registeel here, especially if it does just have Earthquake or S-Toss or what have you. So we go back to Regice, and we barely eat that Earthquake. This is risky business, but Tauros comes in now. T-Wave is going to miss, but we were obviously hoping to connect with Registeel. We'll finish him off with Ice Beam anyway, no problem. And in comes Zapdos. So now we're at 30%. We've seen Earthquake from Registeel, unclear what the full set is, but we know that he's going to counter the crap out of the Raikou, so we're going to have to rely on the Regice and the Medicham if we're going to break through that guy. But in the meantime, we have to get a rest off because this Zapdos is a threat. So there's Thunderbolt, Para, and full Para, and all of a sudden, we've got a bit of an issue. I don't think Java plays this next turn correctly. I think that he gets caught up in this moment of, I can't believe he full powered me, that's bullshit, whatever, he mini tilts. I think in hindsight, you just go to Raikou here and you get the Regice in later. I think letting it go is bad. I think if you had just gone to Raikou there and sacrificed something, whether it's the Raikou or the Medicham, you can get the Regice in after, let it gain lefties, and then just get a rest off. So I think Java messed that up. And from here, with it just being the Raikou, it's pretty much game over. There's the Thunderbolt. There's Earthquake. We're going to need either a crit with a good roll or our own full para. We don't get it, and that Earthquake is going to take out Java and eliminate us from the tournament. So first of all, congrats Lambo in the top 4 yet to be played. I think that Lambo has a good draft for sure, and I think we made enough misplays to where we can't really complain about this outcome. I think that this matchup was winnable for sure, but was never going to be easy. I think that Java made multiple mistakes. Like I said, I pointed them out as we went along. I think he could have subbed a couple times when he didn't. And I think at the end he got tilted by the full para on the Regice, but he could have simply sacrificed something, probably Raikou in this case, and then let the Regice come back in, gain lefties, and then try to get a rest off that way. And obviously, in doing so, we may have gotten crit or may have simply been full powered again, so that was not a guaranteed out, but I still think that was the better line, and Java could have won the game still after the full para happened. But like I said, I think Java made enough mistakes in this game. Not that our opponent played perfectly, but I think Java made enough mistakes in this game to where we don't have the right to complain about being super unlucky or whatever. And I think it's a deserved loss. I don't think Lambo played perfectly either, but we can only control ourselves, and neither did we. I'm kind of surprised by the set of the Registeel, and I'm not convinced that it was optimal, but I get what he was going for here, and he did enough right to earn this. So like I said, grats Lambo, and good luck in the rest of the tournament. He's going to be in the top 4, hasn't played yet at the time of this video, but we'll see how he does. Our run is over, which is crappy. I would like a different structure of this tour to where you can't just lose one game and be out. I'm not saying it was the case in this game, because like I said, I think Java made a number of mistakes, but I think obviously with Mons being Mons, a lot can happen in one game. You can get, triple crit, double frozen, whatever nonsense, and just get completely BS'd out by some idiot. And that's a really unsatisfying way to exit a tournament. So I think some kind of Swiss or more battle pods until you're deeper into the tournament. I could see having pods of 4, just like we did, all the way down until like top 8 or something, and then have a single elimination top 8. Something to that effect. I think that would be a little more forgiving and a little more, avoiding Mon's variance than the current format. But as far as my takeaways from this experience, as far as this list, there's a lot that I would change. Like I said, I think that Dragonite was really good for us consistently. Throughout the entire tournament, there wasn't a single match in which it wasn't a threat. I could tailor the set, whether it was a special attacker, a mixed attacker, a DD sweeper, a defensive set with T-Wave Heal Bell. Whatever I needed to do, it could do. It was going to be good in every single matchup. There was no opponent that it was ever going to be below average against. It was going to be good or better in every single matchup. And I think it's better than Salamence in this. Like I said, that's going to be a controversial take. But I think the fact that it has crucial moves that Mence doesn't have, like Focus Punch, like Heal Bell, like Thunder Wave, I think Dragonite is actually better than Salamence in this. I have no regrets not taking Mence, and I don't know that it would have been great in the matchups that I played, whereas the Dragonite was consistently good for me. It definitely should not have made it back to me. It feels like a top 5, 10 at worst Mon in this format, and I think he should cost more than he does, and I think Mence is overrated. So I think Mence should cost less, and I think Dragonite should cost more. Meta and Raikou, I don't know. I didn't have a lot of experience with Meta, but again, I don't really regret not taking it. Not a lot of them, if any of them, actually made it into the top 8. Again, it's slow. You're relying on Meteor Mash. I think if they change the structure of the tour to some kind of Swiss or some kind of double elimination or whatever, maybe Metagross is better. But as it stands, where you can just be eliminated from the tournament when you miss Meteor Mash, I'm skeptical that Metagross is truly worth the 18 points, and I personally think it should be worth less. Raikou is probably about right. I don't know that it's like wildly better than this other stuff at 17 to be a full point above them, but like maybe. I didn't actually sweep with Raikou at any point in this tour, and I felt that I used it defensively a lot of the time. I think I used it defensively more than I used it offensively. That may just be a product of the pairings that I got, but like I feel like most good drafters can check Raikou, at least to a reasonable degree, but Raikou maybe is correct at 18 points. I don't think either of these others are. Skarmlax Tar, I don't really have any objection. I don't know if they're worth 17 or should be less, but fine. Not convinced that Chansey or Blissey are worth their current points. I think that they're always going to have the physical weakness, and just about anything in any draft in this format can just, hit it with physical attacks and put meaningful pressure on it. And I think that everybody and their mother learns Toxic, which is just always going to neutralize Blissey and Chansey if you're trying to sweep with them. I think they don't really have enough offensive presence, Chansey especially, but really either of them. I didn't get to see it in action, so I'm not certain, but I'm skeptical on both Blissey and Chansey being this high, and I would suspect that both Registeel and Reg Ice are actually better than Chansey and Blissey. Reg Ice was an MVP for me throughout this. It costing 12 is stupid. It's way too low. And Registeel is a legit threat. Not only is it a mixed wall, like T-Wave coverage rest is good in every matchup. But you also have the ability to have the gimmick sets that just win the game, like the aforementioned Curse Amnesia set, that your opponent has to change their entire build around or it just wins. And I think that's quite valuable as well. But I think a mixed wall that's generically good against both sides of physical and special such as Milotic, such as Regice, such as Registeel, in my mind, is better than Chansey Blissey in this format. I'm not excited about these at these point values. Celebi I didn't get to see in action, but it's probably worth at least 16. I could see it being bumped up to 17. It's just too versatile. It does too much. Gengar, maybe 15. It could be right at 16, but any decent special wall can block it. But I guess there's teams, probably teams that drafted badly, that just can't handle it at all. I don't know. 15, 16. Gar's probably about right. Milotic's boring, and a lot of people don't like it. I think it's probably in the right spot because recover, refresh, bulk in mostly sandless games is just very hard to kill. It's just very, very resilient. So I think that Milotic is probably in the right spot. It's not an exciting poke, but it's gonna be solid in most matchups. Starmie I also suspect is in the right spot because of how versatile it is. A lot of the spinners are bad. It gives you a spinner, it gives you natural cure, it gives you T-Wave, which is like one of the best moves, one of the most broken moves. And you can also just go for Off-Star, which, depending on the matchup, can be a real threat. I would have liked to have seen more people bust out like bulky T-Wave Confuse Ray Star. Like I said, I think there's some matchups where your opponent has a proper special wall where Starmie is never going to do anything offensively, and you need to get a little more creative. But Starmie is reliable, and crucially, it is one of the only spinners that can reliably recover. So I would certainly be fine keeping Starmie where it is. Zapdos, I'm also probably fine. Unlike Gengar, it can play a mixed role a little bit better. I think like Drill Peck Zap is viable, or HP Fighting, or whatever. And Passing Substitute, I think, is also really strong as well. I personally would probably view Zapdos as better than Gengar in this, though Gengar does have the normal immunity. But that's a preference thing. Those are probably about in the right spot. Aerodactyl, not convinced belongs at 15. I think it doesn't hit hard enough when it isn't banded, and I think you can just stack a bunch of protects against it and see what it's going to lock on, and I don't think it's that great. It can, of course, play like a stally set with pressure and have like sub-toxic and obnoxious bullshit like that, but I'm not blown away. I think Aerodactyl is a good mon, an annoying mon, but I see it as like closer to 14 than 15 in my mind. Chansey, like I said, way too high, no way. Dugtrio, for sure, way too high. Not only is it not great against a lot of these teams, but it's also a tempo sink every single time. Anytime Dugtrio comes in, traps something, EQs it, you're just begging for a flyer to come in and click DD, for something to come in like my Dragonite and click Substitute. Dugtrio is not always going to have good targets in this, the way that he does in OU. He comes with a risk of coming in and adds very little, if any, defensive utility. He doesn't really switch in on anything. I'm very skeptical that Dugtrio should be 15 points. I think he should be like 14 or maybe even 13. Very skeptical about Dugtrio. Swampert's good, obviously, but it has the same problem as with Mence, where like anybody in the world can just load up on HP grasses. It's better than Mence with that weakness in the sense of Ice Beam is a very common move that everybody learns, that normals learn, that anybody just about can learn. Whereas there is no grass attack like that that's super duper widespread and that is good in ADV. If there were an equivalent, if there were a grass Ice Beam, then Pert would be garbage, but what are you doing? You're splashing Mega Drain, Giga Drain, those moves blow and they're not very splashable, so you're stuck with HP Grass. So in that way, I think that Swampert is probably better than Mence, and his weakness is not as egregious, so I think Swampert at 15 is probably about right. He's probably a weaker 15 or a fine 15 and probably a little too strong at 14. So Swampert, I think, is about right. Dragonite should be up a point for sure. For sure. I will stand by that it is better than Salamence, and I think it's better than probably a lot of the things on this 16 list as well. Dragonite should probably be at least 16. I can maybe even see 17, but he should definitely be at least 16. Going through the 14 list, I didn't get to play with a lot of this stuff, so I'm just giving my impressions. Zam, I think, is fine. I think you can't go too much lower. I think it just, when it hits as hard as it does, and it can go modest in this a lot of the time because you don't even have to go plus speed. A lot of the teams don't have anything anywhere near fast enough to keep up with it, even if it goes modest. So the thing hits like a truck. Combine 3 attack, and you can just tailor the coverage to whatever you're against. Zam is a big, big threat, and I cannot see lowering it lower than 14. I'm kind of surprised it isn't 15, but I'm fine with 14. It definitely can't be lower, and it definitely feels like one of the strongest things in this bracket. Blaziken, yeah, it's a threat. It's a threat for sure. It's probably where it belongs. I don't think it's as strong as Zem, but it's a threatening mixed breaker, and its speed, which is not really good enough for OU, is probably good enough for this format. Breloom, I'm not as sure about. Spore is broken, always. But Breloom's move pool is not that great. So if you do have resistances for fighting, then it doesn't have great alternatives. It doesn't really learn great physical moves. It doesn't get like EQ or Shadow Ball or whatever. It doesn't really learn great physical moves outside of fighting. So I'm not sure. I mean, again, Spore is always going to be good, and Subseed is obnoxious, but Breloom, I think, is very matchup-y and is going to sometimes be better than others. You could argue that Spore is just so broken that it's in 14 automatically, but I'm not sure. Again, I'm fine keeping it here. I would consider going down a point, but it's probably fine. Claydol, I'm not sure, but man, can I tell you that I felt the Donphan was underwhelming. Donphan, I would bump down a point for sure. I was not excited by that poke. Is Claydol miles better than Donphan? I don't know. It is less bulky and it doesn't hit as hard, so those are strikes against it. But it is Spikes immune. It does get Psychic and Ice Beam. Does get Boom. I would probably move Claydol down and Donphan down. I think Claydol to 13, Donphan to 12 is probably what I would do. I suspect Claydol is not amazing, but who knows. Cloyster at 14 seems too high to me. Fori at 14 I can understand because it's less vulnerable, but Cloyster is just weak to everything, and just generic Surfs it even doesn't take very well. Again, moves like Thunderbolt, just everybody learns it, very splashable. It's also weak to every status. I don't know. Spikes are good without a doubt. Not blown away by Cloyster. Obviously, in a sandless game, it's a little bit better, and it can be like a spiker spinner, but I'm still skeptical. I personally think that Fori is probably quite a bit better than Cloyster in this, and I would probably move Cloyster down a point. Gyarados, I'm fine with where he is. I think people should get more creative with it. You can run defensive Gyarados. It has Intimidate. It has very good natural special defense. It learns T-Wave. I think that it doesn't have to be a DD sweeper, but the fact that it can be is really good as well. And it's one of those pokes because it only has that one relevant weakness. Rock Slide kind of matters, but it's really just the electric. I think it's one of those pokes that changes the way that your opponent has to build, the same way that I was forced to run junk like HP Electric Milotic just to cover it. I think that matters a lot because it, like I said, it changes the way your opponent has to build. So I think Gyarados definitely belongs here in the 14. I can even maybe see bumping it up to 15. But Gyara, I think, is very good. Hariyama, I also think, is good. It's slow, but it's very versatile. It can be a very good wall. It can go thick, fat, all bulk. It can go knock off rest. It can go bulk up 3 attacks. I certainly would not move Hariyama down. Whether I would move it up or not sure. Probably not. If we're saying Swampert is a proper 15, which I think it is Hariyama as good as Swampert? Probably not. So maybe 14 is the right place for it, but it definitely shouldn't go down. It's definitely good. I'm surprised with Heracross. I guess it functions differently than Hariyama, but for all intents and purposes, Hariyama is better defensively in every way. More bulk, better resistances, knockoff, all that good stuff. Heracross does get Swords Dance, which obviously Hariyama does not, and then Megahorn is a thing. So I guess it's pretty good. I'm not sure that it should be 14. I'm fine leaving it, but I don't think it's best in class. But it's good. I'm fine with it. Jolteon, I'm not so sure about. Jolteon, I probably would move down a tier. It has no option to go the physical route. There's just nothing. So it's always going to be special, and it's always going to be walled by whatever the special wall is. It'll be walled all day by Regice, Registeel, Steelix, whatever it may be. It can pass substitutes, but like it's really bad substitutes, and it's pretty fragile while it's trying to do it, whereas Zapdos can do it a lot better, both with better substitutes and with better resistances. Jolteon also as a sweeper, yes, it's fast, but it just doesn't hit super duper hard. Not convinced that it belongs in 14. The other stuff that we already talked about, I think, is probably more generally threatening, especially, again, because a lot of those things are mixed and can hit all types of teams rather than being hard-walled by certain kinds of mons. I probably would bump Jolteon down. That's just me. Metacham I was quite satisfied with. 14 I think is the right place. Wouldn't bump it up. Definitely wouldn't bump it down. Definitely viable, and don't regret picking it. I felt like it was pretty good. Moltres, not sure. I might bump it down. Will-O-Wisp is obviously really good. Same problem though. It'll just be walled indefinitely by whatever the special wall is. Granted, two of the best special walls are Regice and Registeel, which Moltres happens to beat. So that is certainly an argument that maybe it should stay, but I don't know. I'm not convinced. It, like anything with thick fat, can hold it off for a long time, though it does have to worry about Will-O-Wisp. Maybe just because of WoW, it has to stay where it is, but otherwise it's just another special attacker. But like WoW is so much better than basically any other status move, even though I do have a huge crush on T-Wave, but like, you know, T-Wave does not cripple, say, Snorlax, whereas obviously Will-O-Wisp does, so maybe Moltres stays, but not blown away. Vaporeon at 14, I'm not so sure about. It does make big subs. It does learn Wish. I don't know. It doesn't have instant recovery. It's very wallable by a lot. I guess the fact that it can pass subs and pass wishes is like the one saving grace that keeps it in 14. And I can live with it. But I also wouldn't hate it if you moved it down. But if I have to give an answer, I guess it probably stays. Donphan, like I said, I found underwhelming. It's very easy to wall, and I found it at its best in matches where it didn't need to spin, and it's only like an okay spinner. But Donphan was never great in any matchup. It ranged from bad to fine, but it was never great, and I think with how weak it is especially, and the fact that it's vulnerable to status, and that it's slow, and that it's not a fantastic spinner, all that stuff combined, Donphan to me should go down a point. I don't think it's super worth it at 13. Maybe you take it because there's just so few spinners and anything looks good when there's only two choices or whatever. But I wasn't blown away by Donphan, and I personally would drop her down to 12. Dusclops at 13 is... that can't be right. It's got to go down. I understand that it learns good moves, Will-O-Wisp, Calm Mind, Ice Beam, Earthquake, all sorts of nonsense. It can't be right. It's slow as dick. It's vulnerable to spikes, crits, every status. It doesn't hit very hard. No way. I know it protects spikes. There's no way. There's absolutely no way. Dusclops is Garbaggio. I think it's 12 at best. I would absolutely be bumping Dusclops down. Another poke I'd absolutely be bumping down is Flygon. It's the same bullshit. Just like when you play against the Salamence, everybody and their mother is going to have Ice Beam and or HP Ice. It's very splashable. Everybody has access to it, and Flygon cannot handle it. My opponent didn't even bring Flygon against me when he could have. And the other guy that had the opportunity to, it did nothing in that matchup. It's not good. Dragons are overrated in this. Dragonite's the best one because it can do other things, but Flygon, it doesn't have utility moves. It has like Toxic. It has like Sub. Flygon's not good in this. Any good opponent is going to load the F up on ice attacks and punish it. It isn't good. It absolutely should go down to 12. Kangaskhan at 13 is definitely right. Normals that hit hard are good in this. Rest plus Early Bird is a very good combo in this. He's got some utility. Kangaskhan's good. 13 is right. Kingdra, I'm not convinced belongs in 13. It doesn't have any utility. It doesn't have any defensive value. It's walled forever by special stuff. Yes, it learns Dragon Dance, but it can't do anything with it. It's just a special attacker at the end of the day, but it doesn't have the defensive utility of some of the other ones. For me, Kingdra is definitely worse than some of the other stuff that belongs in this tier, and I would move it down. Miltank in 13 for sure should not go anywhere. Ton of utility. Heal Bell's good. T-Wave's good. Milk Drink is just recover. You can go curse and go aggro with it. Miltank is definitely better than garbage like Flygon or Dusclops. And certainly Miltank is better than Donphan as well. Hard to compare because they fulfill different roles, but Miltank is definitely the better poke. Miltank's a poke that belongs in this tier, unlike some of this other stuff. Nidoking, I'm fine with being here. I think it's probably a smidge too strong for 12. It doesn't excite me at 13, but I think it's a smidge too strong for 12. It just has a really, really good move pool. Stab EQ, Stab Sludge Bomb. It learns Psychic, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Fire Blast, Mega Horn. It just does a lot. It's just a big threat. I don't think it's an exciting 13, but it's a rightful 13. Porygon 2 for sure should not get moved down. Again, anything bulky with Recover and with T-Wave is just universally going to be good. It has Bolt Beam coverage. It's a good Mon. It definitely stays. Scizor also definitely stays. Great resistances. Has defensive utility. Can be a sweeper with SD and agility. Scizor belongs where it is. These are good Mons in the tier. Unlike Flygon. Unlike Dusclops. Meh on Kingdra. Umbreon, I'm not sure. It adds nothing offensively, but it's a really good special wall defensively. Synchronize definitely is relevant in this tier, especially when you pair it with a Heal Beller. That's pretty nasty. And it's definitely one of the best special walls available. Wish is very good. It can reliably pass it. It's kind of do nothing, but it's pretty good at what it does. It's a pretty good wall. Umbreon at 13, I can absolutely get behind. Moving on to the 12s. Espeon, didn't see it in action. I could see why it would be good. It's like a bad Alakazam in the sweeping department. It's fast, but not as fast. It hits hard, but not as hard. But it does have, and it has worse coverage moves than Zam too. So Zam, like I said, is a 14 or a 15. Do you pay 2 points less for Espeon? Yeah, maybe. It does get Baton Pass with both Substitute and Wish, which Alakazam does not. It's reasonably fast. Yeah, 12 seems about right. Probably a little bit too strong for 11. Doesn't blow me away, but fine Mon. Houndoom at 12 I think is fine. I don't know that Pursuit is as important in this as it is in OU. But Fire plus Dark is good coverage, and it does have a couple of other options. Roar, Beat Up, Toxic, what have you. Probably fine. Doesn't have a lot of defensive utility, but it hits hard enough and is fast enough in this tier anyway, in this format, where I think 12 is justified. Machamp, if we're saying that Hariyama is a proper 14, I think Machamp at 12 is fine. It just doesn't have the defensive utility. It's not as bulky. It doesn't have thick fat. Doesn't have knockoff. But it obviously hits very hard, a little bit harder than Hariyama, and is a legitimate threat, so I think that's fine. Magneton at 12, you have to think how it would be used in this format. Obviously, if you're against Skarm, then that's just luck, and that's very good. But it actually has a ton of resistances. It does, of course, have the 3 weaknesses, but it's one of the only things that is resistant to Bolt Beam, and it can come in on normal attacks as well and resist those. There are definitely sets of bulky Magneton in this with lefties, Protect, T-Wave, whatever, that could be really obnoxious. So I think if you think outside the box on how Magneton could be used and, get your mind out of OU mode, just think about it in the context of this format. I think the 12 is very justifiable. Nidoqueen at 12, I'm not sure. She's quite a bit slower than Nidoking, and it really, really matters. She also doesn't hit as hard and doesn't have, Mega Horn. Maybe Nidoqueen on 12, but, when I see that they're evaluating Nidoqueen as the same as the Reggies, that makes me want to puke. But, the Reggies, I think, are the most egregious misevaluation on this entire list. I personally would probably bump Nidoqueen down to 11. Yeah, I was going to say, but it doesn't offend me at 12. It kind of offends me at 12. She's probably worse than this other stuff. I'd probably bump her down. She could be at 12 if she had to be. But this is outrageous. Regirock, Registeel, and Regice at 12 is stupid. Both Regirock and Registeel should be not only up, but like multiple points up. Regice and Registeel should be like 14 or 15. They really, truly should. They're super versatile. They're among the best walls in the format. They're both an offensive and a defensive threat. They have multiple good sets. Regice and I keep saying rock. Regice and Registeel should both be at least 14, maybe even 15, and Regirock should go up to at least 13, maybe even 14. They all need to go up significantly. They're all really good walls. They're all offensive threats. They all learn broken T-Wave. They all have good coverage move. They're all reliable. They're all good against any squad, whether it's physical or special. They're both an offensive and a defensive threat in every matchup. The Reggies are criminally underrated and underpriced according to this sheet. They should all be 15s or 14s, probably even Regirock. For 11, Arcanine, Articuno are good. I don't know that they're really... Are these worse than like Houndoom? They're certainly not worse than Nidoqueen. Not sure about some of these lower ones. Arcanine and Articuno, I think I would both bump up to 12. Crobat, I'm not blown away by. It hits, it's fast and it hits like reasonably hard with choice band sets, but it has like zero utility. It has good resistances, but it has like no defensive moves. All it can do is like mindlessly attack. I don't think this Mon is very good. Arcanine and Articuno seem significantly better than Crobat to me. So I would say that Arcanine and Articuno should go up to 12, and Crobat should probably stay here at 11. Electabuzz is similar to Crobat in that it doesn't really have any defensive utility other than T-Wave. It doesn't really switch in on much of anything. Crobat at least has resistances. But Crobat and Electabuzz, what they have in common is pretty much the only thing they're good for is attacking. And sometimes they're good at that, but all they really do is they're kind of fast and they kind of attack. So that would be an 11 for me, whereas an Arcanine and an Articuno, I think, have a lot of defensive utility and can viably run rest and defensive sets and probably are a lot more valuable and a lot more flexible than something like Crobat or Electabuzz. Entei's too low, plain and simple. Should be at least 12, maybe even 13. I personally think I would bump Entei up to like 13. It's not quite Raikou, but it's not too far off. It hits very hard, and it's pretty bulky. And the same issues that you have dealing with Raikou, you would have with Entei. And Entei also can function the same way that Raikou functioned. CM rest to attacks, and just be a good special wall. It's not as good as Raikou because it's slower and because it's weak to water, but Entei is good. Entei should be at least a 12, probably a 13. 11 is definitely too low. Executor is also definitely better than Crobat and Electabuzz. It has Sleep Powder, it has Boom, it has Leech Seed. You can build it bulky, it has defensive utility, and it can be a pretty good offensive threat. Executor definitely should get bumped up to 12. Gardevoir also should definitely get bumped up to 12. It has a fantastic move pool. Wish, Will-O-Wisp, Thunderbolt, Psychic, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, lots of coverage, Destiny Bond. Very flexible. Trace is a good ability. Synchronize is a good ability. Again, it can be both an offensive and defensive threat. It can be a Calm Mind Sweeper. It can play a defensive role. Very versatile. Way more versatile than a Crobat or an Electabuzz. Adds a lot to a team. Absolutely should get bumped up to 12. Jinx also should get bumped up to 12. It isn't just a sweeper. It has some utility moves. It can play the role with Mean Look and go that route, play the Trapper. It can just be Calm Mind 3 attacks. Lovely Kiss is stronger than anything that Crobat or that Electabuzz does. It has good coverage. Steals are not as common in this the way that they are in OU. Jinx gets walled forever by like Metagross, Jirachi, but you're not going to play against that stuff as often. It's fast. Jinx is a good sweeper, 100%, goes up to 12 points. Ludicolo is okay. It's very, very status vulnerable is the biggest problem. Its typing is fine. The fact that it matches up well against Swampert is not that relevant here because you're not going to play against it that often. but it can kind of sort of sweep, though it doesn't have any way to enhance its own power other than Rain Dance enhancing Surf. Leech Seed is always going to be a good move. The fact that it's vulnerable to every status really holds it back. Toxic is a problem. WoW is a problem. T-Wave is a problem. I think it stays here at 11. I wouldn't bump it down, but I wouldn't bump it up either. Marowak at 11 is fine. It does learn stuff like Perish Song or whatever, but it realistically, even though it does learn a couple of defensive moves, it doesn't really have any defensive utility. It's in the same club as Crobat and Electabuzz, where all it really does is attack, and sometimes it's good at it, sometimes it hits hard, but that's all it really does. That, to me, is an 11. Ninjask, I don't know. Speed Pass is fine, but I don't think it's broken in this. I don't think it has a lot of defensive utility. I don't think it hits that hard, though it does have Swords Dance. But it is really fast, and it is really annoying. I don't know that it's a proper 11, but I wouldn't want to bump it down because it's the kind of Pokemon, it's bad gameplay. It's the kind of Pokemon that I wouldn't want to encourage people to use more or make it easier for them to pick, because it's just kind of gimmicky. It's just bad gameplay, passing subs, passing SDs. You can't even I lied. You can't even. You can only pass one kind of status, right? So by having Speed Boost, which is only ability, you can't even have Swords Dance on it because you can't pass that. I'm not sure how that works. Maybe you can have it if you can't pass it. Maybe you can have SD, but you can't have both SD plus Swords Dance. But yeah, the fact that it can't pass Swords Dance makes it a lot worse. Fast, bad sweeper, I guess. No defensive utility whatsoever. Doesn't take hits from anything. Not good. Wouldn't bump it down for the reason that I said, but not a great mon. Rhydon, I think, is too high. I think that, again, everybody and their mother has access to at least HP Water, HP Grass, if you want to go that way, but also a ton of things learn Surf. Ton of things learn Ice Beam. It's too vulnerable from the special side. If I were playing against a Rhydon, I would just have I would have the whole team. If it doesn't organically have a good water or a good grass move, I would just have the whole team have HP Grass or HP Water, and this guy would do absolute dick all. Rhydon absolutely should be demoted. 4x weaknesses on slow mons, too crippling in this format. He's got to go down to 10. Honestly, maybe even 9. Rhydon absolutely is too high. Sceptile, I think, should go up. I think the same way you look at like a Nidoking or a Blaziken or an Alakazam as just a fast, threatening sweeper. I think Sceptile is the same thing, but he's priced way lower than they are. I think Sceptile should be at least a 12, maybe even a 13. Its speed is a real issue. Sets like Sub, Leech Seed, Focus Punch, Leaf Blade, super obnoxious. It also gets EQ. It also, you can just go HP, whatever, Ice, Grass, whatever you need it to be. Not Grass, obviously. HP Electric, whatever you need it to be. But it's very threatening. It hits pretty hard. The speed is quite relevant, obnoxious to play against, and it can play a mixed role. It can learn Brick Break. I think that if we're saying that stuff like Nidoking, Blaziken belong up here, clearly Sceptile does too. There's no way in hell that Sceptile is worse than Houndoom. No chance. It's got to be better. It's faster, and it can play a mixed role, whereas Houndoom is only a special attacker and is going to get walled by those special walls. Sceptile should be at least a 12, maybe even a 13. This is clearly too low. Slowbro, clearly too low again. There's no way in hell that it's worse than Houndoom, than Magneton, than Nidoqueen. I think I skipped Venusaur and Weezing because I was too busy ranting about the Reggies. I'm going to come back to them. But Slowbro for sure should go up. Its move pool is too good. It learns Focus Punch, EQ, Calm Mind, every special attack, Psychic, Surf, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Fire Blast. It learns T-Wave, which is busted. It can use Rest effectively. It can be a true bulky water or a mixed sweeper, whatever you need it to be. Slowbro clearly should get bumped up. We'll come back to the rest of these. We'll go back to Venusaur and Weezing that I missed while I was ranting. Venusaur, I think, is probably in the right place. It does learn SD and a couple of physical attacks, but I don't think that's ever going to be super viable. But you can't demote Sleep plus Leech Seed. It's too good. As a special attacker, it's okay. Venusaur is like a Stallymon. It's probably not something that I personally would draft myself. I don't love relying on Sleep Powder, again, when one game loss and you're eliminated, but you can't bump it down. It probably is where it is. Weezing, I think, should either stay where it is or get bumped up. I think it is quite resilient in this format when a lot of people just have like generic shitty UUs that are just like physical attackers, just normal stuff or whatever. I think it's quite resilient, and I think Will-O-Wisp is really obnoxious. Obviously, it's vulnerable from the special side, but you can compensate by booming on stuff, by pain splitting, by going special defense WoW taunt. I mean, there's options. It might not be good enough to bump up. If we're saying that the stuff that's here, like Miltank, for example, is where it belongs, no, Weezing is not as good as Miltank, so perhaps it stays in 12, but you definitely don't bump it down. Coming back over here, Steelix, probably fine at 11, doesn't have the blatant 4x weakness the way something like a Rhydon does, so it's less exploitable. It's generally fairly do nothing, but it's a great normal switch in. It can just fling toxic at stuff. There's definitely going to be matchups like against a Skarmory, against a Weezing, where it's terrible, where it's just completely, utterly walled. So it certainly cannot be more than 11, but I don't think it should go down either. It's probably in the right place. Tauros should go up. That has nothing to do with the way that our tournament ended. It just should. It just hits hard. It's hard to deal with. It is better than some of this stuff, like Houndoom, for example. It just is. Intimidate's good. It hits pretty hard. It actually does learn a couple special moves and a couple of things other than just being a choice bander that it can do. It's a threat in this format. I would go up a point. Typhlosion. I don't know, man. It does learn a couple of physical moves, but it doesn't really switch in on much of anything. It doesn't have a lot of defensive utility. It's not fast, but it's not slow either. It's just somewhere in the middle. It does have pretty good coverage moves. It does have a pretty good move pool, but I don't know, man. It just feels, it's like a bad sweeper. It's like there's a million other things that do what it's trying to do better. It does have a couple of gimmicky sets, but I don't know. I wouldn't bump it down. I mean, when we're starting to talk like the 10s and below, there's a lot of junk. So I guess I wouldn't bump it down, but I certainly wouldn't bump it up. Ursaring, I guess, stays here at 11. It has like 0 defensive utility, but it hits very hard, and Guts can be a good ability. And then with Swords Dance, it can hit really, really hard, but it's slow as dick, and it doesn't add anything defensively. It stays at 11 because of how hard it hits, but it definitely can't get bumped up. Armaldo is too low, for sure. It can be a Swords Dance sweeper. It learns Rapid Spin, definitely one of the most underappreciated Rapid Spinners in this. It also learns Knockoff. It's one of those pokes that's going to be decent in every single matchup, even against traditional special walls, such as Weezing, such as Skarmory. It can hit those things reasonably hard, especially after a Swords Dance. And the Rapid Spin is really, really valuable. Knockoff is decent. It could play a defensive role. It's also a normal resist. Armaldo should go up at least one slot to 11. It maybe should even go in 12, but Armaldo is way too low. It's a silly rating to have it at 10. All of the UU spinning waters, so Blastoise, Kabutops, and Tentacruel, are bang for your buck as it stands. Blastoise should go up to 11. It's better than a 10. It's a good wall. It could just have generic sets like Rapid Spin, Rapid Spin, Protect, Surf, Ice Beam. It can have Refresh, it can have Haze, it can have Roar, it can have EQ. It's versatile, it's reliable, it's a good mon. It functions as a bulky water, it gives you the spin, it has a good move pool. It should go up. Blastoise should be an 11. Credilli is a decent wall, but it's very status vulnerable. The fact that it's so fucked by Toxic T-Wave WoW really, really hold it back. It does learn Recover. It is a normal resist. It does have a decent move pool. I think Credilli is pretty good. Wouldn't offend me if you moved it up to 11. Wouldn't offend me if you kept it at 10. As it stands at 10, it's good bang for your buck. Very much a poke worth buying.
but it has its problems. Dodrio, yeah, 10 or 11. I mean, I don't know. I personally would rather have a Dodrio than an Ursaring. They function largely in the same way, but Dodrio hits that much harder, and it has Baton Pass. By hits harder, I mean is faster. Ursaring hits harder. But Dodrio is going to be a choice bender a lot of the time. It's fast. It's like a mini Tauros almost. It doesn't have a lot of defensive utility, but unlike something like Ursaring, at least it can like switch in on an Earthquake or a Grass attack and get a little bit of bang for your buck. Don't think it's a great poke, but I think things that legitimately hit hard and are fast, like Tauros, are probably undervalued as a whole in this. So I think I personally would bump Dodrio up to 11, but you certainly don't move it down. Hitmontop, Hitmonlee, 10's probably the right spot. They're just bad spinners. Hitmonlee hits like kind of sort of hard, but it's not a good poke. Hitmontop has Intimidate, but has garbage HP and doesn't really have the overall bulk to take advantage of what it's trying to do. Spinners are valuable in this. These guys don't switch in on too much. I guess they're fine at 10. It's very silly to me that like these pokes are the same tier as Blastoise or Armaldo. That definitely is not correct. Armaldo, Blastoise are definitely better than Hitmons. But I think if we're calling Credilli and Dodrio proper 10s, then that's probably about where the two good Hitmons belong as well. Lantern at 10 is fine, reasonably bulky, gets T-Wave, gets Surf, gets T-Bolt, gets Ice Beam, decent coverage, only has the two type weaknesses. Not an exciting poke, but a totally viable one. I think Lantern at 10 is fine. Omastar at 10 I think is too low, should probably go up to 11. It's a normal resisting spiker that hits really hard. That should be all you need to know. It has a very high base special attack stat, gets Surf, gets Ice Beam. The normal resist matters, the spikes matter. I think Omastar should be an 11. Scyther at 10 I think is fine. No defensive utility. Can sweep, is very vulnerable, very fragile. Not an exciting poke or a poke that I personally would ever draft. And again, calling Scyther as viable as Armaldo or Blastoise is stupid. Slowking is just a slightly worse Slowbro. I think Slowbro should probably go up, like I said. And I think Slowking should also go up in turn. So I think it's Slowbro at 12 and Slowking at 11. Tentacruel should go up a point for sure. Same deal with Armaldo and Blastoise. The Mon is genuinely good when it isn't just spinning. It can do a lot of things. It can have like SD, Sludge Bomb, that kind of set. It learns Ice Beam. It learns Giga Drain. It learns Surf. Couple of options. It's pretty fast. Decent spinner. Tentacruel for sure should go up. Vileplume at 10 is fine. I don't think it's quite good enough to go to 11, but it's totally fine at 10. It gets aromatherapy. It actually has decent stats all the way around. Has a couple of useful resistances. I think it's fine. We're not going to talk about all the 9s, 8s, 7s, 6s, or whatever, or we're going to be here all night, but I do want to talk about a couple of specific standouts that I think are not correct. I'm not going to argue about fucking Magby and Coughing and Machoke or whatever. I don't have time for that. But I will talk about a couple of these that I think are incorrect. So we'll start with Altaria, which I think should be higher, should probably be at least a 10. The fact that it has Natural Cure and Rest is very useful in this. It's also pretty bulky. I can totally see sets where it would be max HP, max special defense, and you just have Rest, and you would fling Toxics at things and play the special wall roll, call it Toxic Flamethrower, Protect Rest, or something to that effect. And it's a very good budget special wall in this. Like I said, Rest plus Natural Cure, quite solid. It's going to have defensive utility in any matchup, and it can be a bad Dragon Dance sweeper in a pinch. Definitely quite a bit better than a lot of these crappy 9s. I would move Altaria up to 10. Camerupt at 9, I'm not sure. It's very slow. That might be right. Clefable, I could see again moving up to 10, but I'm not sure. Granbull, I think, should go up to 10. Granbull hits hard as a normal that can play the Choice Band role, but it also gets Broken T-Wave, and I believe it gets Heal Bell. No, it gets Wish, which is also a good move. Granbull, I think, is really good bang for your buck at 9. I would bump it up to 10. Hypno is definitely too low at 9. Hypno has good coverage moves. Hypno has Wish. Hypno is a very viable special wall in this. It's also a sleep absorber with Insomnia. Hypno should go up. Kabutops is a spinner. There should be no spinner that is remotely viable that is lower than 10. Kabutops should definitely go up to 10. Lapras, I'm not sure. Anybody else stand out here? Rest of these are probably fine. I was not blown away by Swallow. Walrein could probably go up to 10 as well. It's one of the best UUs. Has better stats as a whole than most of this stuff. Is relatively bulky. Can have thick fat. Can have Curse EQ and function as like a bad Curse Lax. And then obviously you have Stab Surf, Stab Ice Beam. Decent wall. Does have some utility. Like I said, thick fat, yawn, a couple other things. Walrein's probably a 10. Glalie needs to go up like 2 points. It's dumb at 8. Spikers are busted. Glalie one of the hardest spikers to stop. It gets boom. It has a good move pool. Glalie should go up not only to 9, but should go up to 10. Again, saying that Glalie is as good as garbage, like Huntail, for example, or like Sharpedo, for example, is silly. Clearly, Glalie is not only better, but considerably better than those kind of garbage mons. Glalie should absolutely be a 10. Let's see. Jump Bluff. Mischievous is probably a 9. Gets CM. Good coverage moves. Ghosts are good. Normal resists are good. EQ resists are good. I would bump him up. Raichu might also be a 9. Encore, Fast Encore is good. Mixed coverage. Focus Punch, T-Bolt, Hidden Power. Pretty versatile. Learns a lot. Learns Surf. Gonna be reasonably threatening in any given matchup. I would bump that up to a 9. Slaking, I think, is poo because any opponent worth their weight in shit would put Protect on all 6 Pokemon, and Slaking will do actual nothing throughout the entire match. Slaking at 8, I think it should be Slaking at 0. Slaking at don't ever pick this. Like I said, you just stack Protects against it, and it'll never do anything. Ever, 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 ever. I think it's terrible. Slaking at 8. How about you give me 8 points to take Slaking? Thing is trash. Ampharos is blatantly too low. Should be probably a 9. Rest of this seems fine. I would probably move Rapidash up a point. Rest of that seems fine, and yeah, and at this point we're pretty much getting into the dregs. I'm not going to argue with you guys about NFEs and about fucking Sudowoodo and Seadra and that kind of crap. Octillery maybe should go up a point. I don't care if you do or you don't. But those are my overall thoughts. I think that at the end of the day, this format is quite skill intensive. Certainly in the building, maybe in the drafting. The way that Emerald Open specifically is structured, you are kind of at the mercy at who else is in your draft pool and what kind of wet and wild stupid shit they do, how competent are they. Obviously, some draft pools are better than others, and you're going to get boned sometimes, and other times you're just going to get the dream hookup, and that's just kind of the variance that comes with it. But I do think it's skill intensive, and certainly the preparation for any given match and the building is skill intensive. I would like to see Emerald Open in particular restructured to where you're not just out with one game loss from the top 64 on. And that's not sour grapes. Like I said, I think Jabba made enough mistakes in the game to warrant his loss, and he doesn't get to cry about luck. It really has nothing to do with that. It's just the fact that in any given game of Mons, if we're just playing a best of one, and it has to be best of one because best of 3 with draft teams against the same opponent is stupid. That should not be an option. But yeah, when it's just best of one, I mean, you know how Pokemon goes. Sometimes you get crit 3 times, you get frozen twice, you get parried 3 times, whatever. It could just be a lot of nonsense. It could just be a lot of variance, and it stinks to go out that way, especially with cash on the line. So I think Emerald Open could probably be restructured in such a way to make that less of a thing. Like I said, I personally would recommend pods all the way up until you cut to a top 8, and then you do a single elimination playoff. But there's a couple ways to do it, and I think it should be done. Regardless of the structure of Emerald Open specifically, just the draft format as a whole, like I said, I think is skill intensive. I think this particular list has plenty of room for improvement, and I think that the format is underexplored and that a lot of people who play these draft tournaments are pretty casual and haven't really dipped too much into the competitive side of Mons and maybe aren't the greatest Mons players, and that's not intended as a shot or as disrespectful. I think a lot of people who are the louder voices about what's good, what's not good, and what something should be tiered or whatever are not necessarily the people that you should be listening to. They may be enthusiastic, but they aren't the greatest players, and they don't really know what they're talking about. And I think that this list, like I said, has a lot of room for improvement. I think with more time and exploration and with more good players playing this format, it could certainly be fine-tuned, and this could turn into something really good. I genuinely enjoyed being part of this tournament, and I thought the prep each week, it felt like a puzzle. It felt like I had to solve a puzzle, and I mean that in a really good way. It felt good to come up with the good solution. It felt good to take all the stuff into consideration and all the gimmicky sets and what if he does this, what if he does this, and to come up with the correct solution. That was very satisfying each week. It actually required thinking. And I think this format is a lot of fun and something that good players, if they caught on to it, could really enjoy. Because like I said, it's very skill intensive at the end of the day, and the more you know about Pokemon, the better you're going to be at this. But this list definitely can use improvement, and the structure of Emerald Open could be better as well. So those are my overall thoughts. It's been a long series, and this video in particular has been lengthy. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in the next video. CALLOUS Invitational 7 is about to start. The pairings are up. No matches have played yet, but they're gonna real soon. If you want to support that tournament, we're taking donations. We need them. We're trying to beat last year's record, which was just shy of 2,600. If we can crack 2,600, or hell, let's go for $3,000. It really, truly is the final CALLOUS Invitational this year, so let's go out with a bang. Appreciate you guys watching. See you in the next video.